The hand under the thigh, the somatic oath, the Nuzi tablets, the polyvagal covenant, and the healing of embodied promise. Welcome back to our series. We have now explored the Vav nail and the He breath and the Zakan pictographs and the Sheming pun and the Apatheia and the Probabikos and the Targums and Bina and the Chiasm and the Peel kneeling and the Aleph Tav and the Gematria and Rashi and the Ramban and Origen and Augustine and Chrysostom and Ambrose and Palamas and the four S's and Haevd as worship and work and Eliezer as my God as help and Mashal as living parable and the namelessness of the servant as a Trinitarian portrait and the pure intention of Climacus and the willingness of Theophanes in the apophatic surrender of Simeon. Today we go into the ancient oath gesture that is both the most physically specific and the most theologically freight moment in all of verse 2. Genesis chapter 24, verse 2. Put your hand under my thigh. Simna yadekha tahat yerekhi. 5 Hebrew words that contain within them an entire theology of embodied covenant. The imperative sim is from the root sum. Sum in Hebrew is not the verb for casual placement. Sum is the verb used when God sets the stars in the firmament in Genesis 1, verse 17. It is the verb used when a judge establishes a verdict as fixed and binding. It is the verb used when a foundation stone is laid. Sum speaks of intentional, deliberate, permanent establishment. The thing that is summed stays placed. It does not drift or shift. When Abraham says Sim, put your hand, he is not asking for a temporary gesture. He is asking for a permanent establishment of commitment. The particle na, please or I pray you. We examined this briefly in our previous episode as the grammar of invitation rather than coercion. But let us go deeper into its significance. In Hebrew grammar, na is classified as a particle of entreaty. Its function is to transform a command into a request without removing the weight of what is being asked. And the combination of the firm imperative sim with the gentle particle na creates a grammatical tension that is itself a portrait of the character of God. Firm in purpose, gentle in invitation, absolute in covenant, tender in communication. Abraham does not bark at his servant. He invites him into the most serious commitment of his service. And in this combination of firmness and tenderness, the text models for us the grammar of divine love. God's purposes are non-negotiable and his invitations are always gracious. The word yadekha, your hand. In Hebrew anthropology and theology, the hand is the organ of human agency. The hand is the place where inner intention meets outer reality, where the invisible world of purpose becomes visible in the physical world of action. Throughout the Hebrew scriptures, the Yad Adonai, the hand of the Lord, is the image of divine power at work in history. The 10 mighty works of God in Egypt are the 10 acts of the divine Yad. The hand of the Lord was stretched out over the sea. The hand of the Lord drove out the nations before Israel. The hand of the Lord was upon the prophets in vision. And now Abraham is asking his servant to bring his yad, his entire capacity for agency, his entire power of accomplishment in the world, into alignment with the oath he is about to swear. The word tahat, under or beneath. The spatial direction carries a theological meaning as precise as the grammatical form. Not beside. Not above. Beneath. The posture of going beneath something is the posture of submission, of acknowledging that something carries a weight under which you willingly place yourself. The servant's hand goes beneath the thigh, beneath the covenant identity of the patriarch, beneath the generative source of the promise, beneath the physical mark of circumcision that signifies Abraham's belonging to the covenant God. The servant is placing his entire agency beneath the covenant. He is saying, my capacity to act is not my own. It is submitted to the covenant purpose of the one who sends me, the word yerekhi, my thigh. The Hebrew root of yerek also connects to the word yarak, meaning the far reaches, the innermost recesses, the remotest parts of something. The thigh is the innermost part of the body, the most interior, the most hidden, the most generative. And an oath sworn at the innermost place of the body is an oath sworn at the innermost place of being. It is not a surface oath. It is not a verbal formality. It reaches into the deepest interior of the swearer's identity. This is the difference between a contract and a covenant. A contract is made on the surface, enforced by external authority. A covenant is made in the depths of the person, enforced by the integrity of their innermost being. There is another extraordinarily significant dimension to the thigh in the broader narrative of Genesis. It is the same part of the body where the angel struck Jacob in Genesis 32, verse 25, during the night-long wrestling match at Peniel that transformed the supplanter into Israel. The angel touched Jacob's yerek, the socket of his hip, and it was dislocated. And from that moment, Jacob walked with a limp. The thigh of Genesis 24 and the thigh of Genesis 32 are the same anatomical location in the same covenant family. Abraham swears the oath at the thigh. Jacob receives the wounding at the thigh. And in both cases, the thigh is the place where the covenant is most bodily, most painfully, most transformatively real. In Abraham's thigh is the covenant promise. In Jacob's thigh is the covenant wound. And together they tell us that the covenant passes through the body, that it is inscribed in flesh, that it costs something physical, that it leaves a mark. Now let us enter the historical and archaeological dimensions of this gesture with full comprehensiveness. The Nuzi tablets, a collection of ancient cuneiform documents discovered at the site of Nuzi in modern Iraq in excavations conducted in the 1920s and 1930s, dating to the 15th and 16th centuries before the Common Era, provide the richest surviving parallel documentation for the social and legal customs of the patriarchal period. These tablets include records of adoption ceremonies, inheritance agreements, household covenant rituals, and oath-swearing practices that illuminate the world of Abraham with a precision unmatched by any other ancient source. The Nuzi texts reveal that in the ancient household economies of the Near East, oaths were not merely verbal agreements. They were somatic performances in which the body of the swearer or the body of the one to whom the oath was made was physically engaged as the guarantor of the commitment's seriousness. The Code of Hammurabi, the great Babylonian legal code inscribed on a basalt stele nearly 8 feet tall and dating to approximately 1754 before the Common Era, predates the patriarchal period but reflects legal customs that permeated the ancient Near East for centuries on either side of its composition. The Hammurabi Code treats oath swearing as what we might call a total person act. The swearer stakes not merely their reputation or their property but their entire personal identity on the truth of what they are asserting. The legal consequences of false oath swearing in the Hammurabi Code are severe precisely because the oath was understood to engage the swearer at the deepest level of their personal being. An oath was not a verbal transaction. An oath was a covenant of the whole self. The diplomatic correspondence discovered at ancient Mari on the upper Euphrates, dating to the 18th century before the Common Era, describes treaty ceremonies involving elaborate physical gestures in which the contracting parties or their representatives performed symbolic bodily acts to seal the agreement. At ancient Ugarit, the Canaanite city on the Syrian coast whose excavation beginning in 1929 produced the Ras Shamra tablets, oath ceremonies involving physical contact appear in both legal and mythological texts. At ancient Egypt, oaths were sometimes sworn upon the knee of the pharaoh, the most powerful physical symbol of sovereign authority in the Egyptian world. And across all these parallel sources from the ancient Near East, the pattern is consistent. The most serious covenants engaged the body. The most binding oaths were somatic oaths. The Genesis Apocryphon, one of the Dead Sea Scrolls discovered beginning in 1947 in the caves of Qumran, is an Aramaic retelling of Genesis narratives that demonstrates how the Second Temple Jewish community read the patriarchal stories. The Qumran community was a covenant renewal community. They had gone into the desert of Judea to reconstitute the purity of the covenant between God and Israel, and they read the patriarchal narratives as the founding documents of that covenant. For them, the embodied oath gestures of the patriarchs would have been understood not merely as ancient social customs but as living images of the kind of total, bodily, irreversible commitment that their own covenant community was attempting to embody in the desert. Now let us bring the full depth of contemporary somatic psychology to bear on this ancient gesture. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk's work demonstrates that traumatic experience is stored not only in the conscious cognitive memory but in the body's own implicit memory, in the nervous system, in the musculature, in the pattern of breath and posture and autonomic response. Trauma is somatic. It lives in the body. And if trauma is somatic, healing must also engage the body. The body that was wounded in the experience of violation or abandonment or betrayal needs to be met by healing at the somatic level, not only at the level of thought and belief. Dr. Stephen Porges, whose polyvagal theory has revolutionized the understanding of the autonomic nervous system's role in social engagement and trauma response, describes 3 states of the nervous system: the ventral vagal state of social engagement and safety, the sympathetic state of fight or flight, and the dorsal vagal state of freeze or shutdown. The oath ceremony of Genesis 24 is a perfect example of what Porges calls a ventral vagal, co-regulated social engagement. Abraham and his servant are fully present to each other. There is eye contact. There is mutual recognition. There is the quality of presence that signals safety to the nervous system. And in this state of co-regulation, the covenantal commitment is made at a depth that would be neurologically impossible in a state of threat or shutdown. This is why the gathering of God's people for worship and prayer matters at a level that goes beyond mere religious convention. When believers gather in the presence of God, co-regulating their nervous systems in an environment of shared trust, shared attention, and shared orientation toward the living God, the commitments they make in that gathered state are made at a deeper neurological level than anything possible in isolation. The hand under the thigh is a template for embodied, co-regulated, community-grounded covenant formation. And the Church, at its most authentic, is meant to create exactly these conditions. Ambrose of Milan saw in the physical gesture of the hand under the thigh a foreshadowing of the Incarnation. He argued that the thigh represented the messianic lineage, the fleshly line through which the Son of God would take on human nature. The oath sworn on that lineage was therefore, in Ambrose's reading, an oath sworn on the coming body of Christ. The servant was being commissioned on the mystery of the Incarnation before the Incarnation had taken place. His hand touching the place of covenant seed was reaching across the centuries and touching, in shadow and in type, the womb that would hold the Messiah, the flesh that would be born of Mary, the body that would die and rise and ascend. Gregory Palamas, in the Hesychast tradition, saw in the servant's gesture the image of the soul's most intimate contact with the divine life. For Palamas, the deepest prayer is not the prayer of the lips but the prayer of the heart, the prayer that descends below the level of rational discourse into the depths of the inner person where the human spirit touches the uncreated energies of God. And the servant placing his hand under the thigh of the patriarch was, for Palamas, an icon of this deepest prayer. The soul going down into its innermost place, the yerek of interior life, and touching there the very source of divine life. From that contact, the mission is born. From that depth of prayer, the commission is received. For the person listening today who carries the wound of broken promises, of violated covenants, of trust betrayed at the most intimate level, this ancient gesture is a healing sacrament. It declares that in the economy of the God of Abraham, the most serious commitments are made at the most intimate level. They are not made with fingers crossed. They are not made as social conventions to be discarded under pressure. They are made at the innermost place of the person, the yerek, the deepest interior, with the full weight of the permanent establishment encoded in the sim, the firm setting, the fixed commitment. And the God who swears his own covenant promises, as Hebrews 6 tells us, swears by himself, because there is nothing greater to swear by. His promise is as deep as his being. His covenant reaches into his own innermost place. The healing affirmation from this passage is this: my God's promises are somatic. They are not merely verbal. They are embodied. They are as physical as the hand under the thigh, as incarnate as the Word made flesh, as bodily as the resurrection of the Son of God in a material body that will never die again. The God who keeps covenant at the level of his own eternal being keeps covenant with me at the level of my body, my nervous system, my most embodied experience. His faithfulness meets me where I actually live, in flesh, in breath, in the somatic reality of a human person who has been touched and wounded and healed and is still being healed by the one who swears by himself. Join us in episode 7 where we enter the divine title, the Hipah of the Oath, the name YHWH, the plural Elohim and the Trinity, the Hebrew Shamayim as fire and water, and the profound healing of the vertical-horizontal split. For prayer and connection, reach out at Christ4Life143@gmail.com. Subscribe, share, stay tuned.